Today, I want to talk about United States aid to Ukraine for the Ukraine war efforts, who has been invaded by Russia, as we know, for about the last 15, 16 months. And I want to start, because I was already thinking about doing a segment on this topic. And then this morning I woke up and I saw this gem from the Twitter account Clown World. As we can see, it's a Twitter account with over 1.5 million followers. The tweets and activity I've seen from this account over the years, I get the impression that this is a right-wing political account that mocks culture and politics from a right-wing point of view. I might be mistaken, but that's the impression I've gotten. Anyway, they tweeted this video saying McDonald's in Kiev in Ukraine last night. And, yeah, right here. Everything in Kiev just going fine. Look at it. Look at this nice McDonald's, huh? There's no war. There's no bombs. There's no air raid sirens or alarms or anything. No smoke. Everything's just going fine in Kiev, Ukraine. Everyone's just enjoying McDonald's. You know, what's the big deal? What's going on? Nothing to see here. I've noticed a few comments that are related to today's topic. Like this one right here. It says, "Give me back my tax money now." Another person says, and again, these are tweets that are getting a lot of likes and retweets. People saying, LMAO, they took that Biden check and made a new McDonald's. We have another comment down here, has over 600 likes, saying, hope they're enjoying the 400 plus billion that we've spent. Yeah, the United States just gave $400 billion to Ukraine, and I guess they just spent it on a nice, fancy McDonald's. I've seen a lot of comments like this in the replies. There are a lot of replies, a lot of quote tweets, a lot of comments and quote tweets sharing this attitude. And if you recall, a lot of people, when I think it was when Zelensky came to the United States, when he came to Washington, D.C., a lot of people were calling Volodymyr Zelensky a welfare queen, including Donald Trump Jr., at least according to Russia Today. I guess the implication being that Volodymyr Zelensky, he's just living the fine life in beautiful Ukraine, on the taxpayer dime. And recall, back 6 months ago, I did a whole video reaction to this video from Jesse Waters at Fox News when FTX collapsed. And everyone was talking about FTX and how much money they were giving to the Democratic Party and Democratic candidates and this and that. Jesse Waters had this hypothesis, so to speak, that FTX was essentially a money laundering scheme where Democrats were giving billions of dollars to Ukraine, and Ukraine was partnering and investing in FTX, and then FTX was giving that money to Democrats and this and that. So a lot of people think that all this money that's going to Ukraine, it's just in the form of money that's going into politicians' pockets, notably Volodymyr Zelensky. So I thought we could look at a few articles that explain how the aid to Ukraine is being utilized. And this is an article on the Council of Foreign Affairs. It was put up May 16th, so just a little over a week ago, titled, "How Much Aid Has the U.S. Sent to Ukraine?" Here are 6 charts. And I actually want to start off at the bottom. I want to start off with these charts at the bottom because it looks like the United States has by far contributed the most aid to the Ukraine war effort, as you can see with this chart. But then if you go to this chart, you'll notice that the United States actually lags behind other countries when it comes to a share of GDP. We have all these countries like Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, Norway, Poland, Czech Republic, Bulgaria, United Kingdom. Some of these countries are obviously right on the border of Russia. And they're giving a higher percentage. Well, they're giving less money and less aid than the United States. They're giving a higher percentage of their GDP to the war effort in Ukraine, which begs the question, are they all getting hoodwinked and bamboozled by this alleged welfare queen, Volodymyr Zelensky? Are they all in on this money laundering scheme that Jesse Waters implies? Or is it the case that a lot of these countries, they recognize the implications of Russia under the leadership of Vladimir Putin just waltzing in on into Ukraine and taking over the country, and knowing that that's probably a threat to their long-term sovereignty, their long-term survival. Guess I'll let you guys figure that one out. But let's take a look at this article. It was written by Jonathan Masters and Will Merrill. Every year, the United States sends billions of dollars in aid and much more than any other country to beneficiaries around the world in pursuit of security, economic, and humanitarian interests. Heading into 2022, U.S. foreign assistance was driven by various priorities of the Biden administration, including combating climate change, responding to the COVID-19 pandemic, and countering authoritarianism. But since Russia's invasion in February of that year, Ukraine has become far and away the top recipient of U.S. foreign aid. It's the first time that a European country has held the top spot since the Harry S. Truman administration directed vast sums into rebuilding the continent through the Marshall Plan after World War II. Since the war began, the Biden administration and the United States Congress have directed more than $75 billion in assistance to Ukraine, which includes humanitarian, financial, and military support, according to the Kiel Institute for the World Economy, a German research institute. The historic sums are helping a broad set of Ukrainian people and institutions, including refugees, law enforcement, and independent radio broadcasters, though most of the aid has been military-related. Dozens of other countries, including most members of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, i.e. NATO, and the European Union, are also providing large aid packages to Ukraine. And as we can see with this chart, the overwhelming majority of the aid to Ukraine is in the form of military weapons and equipment. $23.5 billion alone are weapons and equipment from the Defense Department stocks provided through presidential drawdowns. It looks like a lot of it is financial. But again, a lot of people act like a lot of the money is just in the form of cash that's going in the pockets of Ukrainian politicians. So what, am I to believe that they're what? As we can see in the chart down here, are they putting missiles and tanks? Like, remember the movie Ant-Man when Hank Pym had a tank in his pocket because he shrunk it down with his shrinking technology tech? Is that what's going on? Is that how politicians are lining their pockets with tanks and drones and helicopters? Is this what welfare queens generally receive, by the way? When we think of welfare queens, they just getting tanks and helicopters and other forms of art. I don't know. And there is something to be said about the fact that the United States is a little too generous with foreign aid, especially when it comes to issues like climate change. There's a real discussion to be had there, but when people hyper-focus on one specific country, don't really seem bothered by other forms of military aid. I think it can often be a red herring. Also, going back to what I said earlier, it looks like 47 countries have provided military aid to Ukraine. It looks like, according to this chart, look, we got Australia, we got countries in South America. Like, are all these countries, Japan, are all these countries getting hoodwinked and bamboozled into supporting the current thing, all while Volodymyr Zelensky just sits back like the welfare queen that he allegedly is? Is that what we're supposed to believe? There's also this article I read from USA Facts, which I think is Steve Ballmer's website. I've used this as a source before. They just try to provide just the facts without any political spin or anything like that. How much money has the U.S. given to Ukraine since Russia's invasion? 1 year in, the U.S. has allocated nearly $115 billion in emergency funding to support Ukraine in wartime. As we can see, this is from February 24th of this year. The United States has appropriated approximately $115 billion in emergency funding to support Ukraine since February 24th of 2022. This aid provides money for Ukraine, American partners in regions affected by the conflict, and U.S. national security programs. Here's another way to think of it. The United States federal government spent $6.48 trillion last year, meaning that the money spent on Ukraine today would be equivalent to approximately 2% of the U.S. budget. Nearly $40 billion of that aid has already gone to humanitarian relief and military security assistance. Some aid falls under a lend-lease program President Joe Biden signed in May of 2022, meaning that Ukraine will have to pay back a certain amount to the United States after the war, plus interest. Now, this is a part I find interesting because I've, in the past, when looking into this, I try to figure out how much of this money is just being lent out or how much of this aid is being lent out. And if you recall the lend-lease program during World War II, I think, if I'm getting my facts straight from memory, I think the United Kingdom was paying back the United States for the lend-lease program for about 70 years. I think they didn't pay it off until about 2008. So a lot of this money, it sounds like, will be coming back to the United States. So I'm not sure how fair it is to frame it as just a welfare handout, as many are implying. How is the money for Ukraine distributed? Nearly 95% of the discretionary spending for Ukraine goes to the Department of Defense and the State Department, which manages the U.S. Agency for International Development. The remaining funds are dispersed among government and non-government agencies that provide humanitarian aid to Ukraine and Ukrainian refugees. While tracking every dollar of appropriated funds is difficult, a large portion goes towards security and economic concerns for the United States and European allies. Several billion is for domestic national security concerns such as replenishing U.S. military equipment and munition stocks. Other domestic funds go to programs addressing cybercrime threats, promoting energy independence, and even seizing property belonging to Russian oligarchs. Well, if you want more energy independence, here's an idea. Deregulate energy. Which, from what I could tell, the Biden administration is not really that interested in doing, because it might go against his climate change agenda. Roughly $20 billion is for European command operations, which involves deploying military personnel throughout Eastern European countries, subsequent intelligence support operations, and additional assistance to friendly foreign nations. The largest portion of the aid goes to the Ukrainian people, covering military assistance, refugee resettlement, macroeconomic support, and more. The money from these bills can take years to distribute. According to the Congressional Budget Office reports, the U.S. expects to provide emergency funding for Ukraine and neighboring countries until 2032. And we can see a chart that kind of projects the long-term assistance. As the article goes on to say, this means while the U.S. has set aside roughly $115 billion for aid, most of that money has not even been spent yet. Departments that received emergency funding have discretion over how much money will be dealt out over time. And I've seen articles over the last few months that talk about this, how while the United States has allocated, has promised aid to Ukraine, especially when it comes to military equipment. Oftentimes, it could take weeks, if not months, for that military equipment to finally reach Ukrainian hands. So yeah, a lot of people will talk about, whenever they talk about Ukrainian aid, a lot of that money is lent and expected to be paid back. A lot of the aid is not even money. It's in the form of military equipment, and a lot of it has not even been spent yet. So I think when people frame Volodymyr Zelensky as some sort of welfare queen, or talk as if, these fancy McDonald's in Kiev are being built with American tax dollars, I think it's very disingenuous. It's very misleading, to say the least.